Good? Thank you for joining me today. So like many of you in this room, I am a business traveler, and I spend about a third of my working year up in the air, so to speak, traveling from Denver, Colorado to various parts of the Pacific Northwest and California for business. I can be on a flight anywhere from a couple of hours to 7 or more if I'm flying to Anchorage, Alaska. As frequent flyers, we're all very familiar with the comforts and discomforts of air travel, such as hoping that once we're on board the plane, the other passengers follow the golden rule of only placing one bag in the overhead bin and placing their other bag below the seat in front of them. But how many times have we had to give up our carry-on to the flight attendant to check for us because not everybody had the courtesy of following this golden rule? This doesn't even mention the other discomforts of air travel, such as having to sit next to a very large person who literally spills and rolls over into your seat. The crying baby who, as a parent, I'm actually okay with the crying baby. Give me the crying baby over the very large person spilling over into my seat any day of the week. Or the very obnoxious person listening to their music, their movies, or television without the benefit of earphones, or even worse, singing along to whatever it is that they're listening to. But those are all things that we can deal with now, since many of us are frequent flyers, and we have gained privileges such as boarding early, being able to pick our seats, and being able to stow our luggage ahead of other passengers. But now that we get to enjoy these comforts of air travel again, the FCC and its chairman, Tom Wheeler, announced in a press release on October 31st that they will lift the ban on the use of cell phones and other electronic devices in flight and during takeoff and landing, and will let the airlines determine for themselves what their individual policies for cell phone use will be. This is a decision that I feel could amplify the discomforts of air travel for us again. The FCC has come to this decision due to the advancements in cell phone technology alleviating any concerns that transmissions from the ground to the air could disrupt the systems on the airplane. But while the technological dangers may no longer exist, the human dangers of disputes and confrontations will be amplified. So today, I want to persuade you that while being able to read our e-readers, listen to our music, and watch our movies during takeoff and landing is fantastic, the unrestricted use of cell phones for conversation in flight without sound policies could be one of the worst decisions that the FCC could allow for a number of reasons, including the safety risks to the passengers and crew in an emergency situation, and the social risks of being forced to listen to one-sided conversations for hours on end. I will persuade you of this by discussing how this change will personally affect you, overcome any objections you may have to my argument, should you be in favor of the change, including my suggestions for sound and reasonable policies if it goes into effect, and finally, show you what the inside of the plane could look like and sound like if such policies aren't implemented. And I will close with my suggested call to action that you can take to help make sure that this change in policy does not ruin air travel for us again. So first, let's talk about how this change will personally affect you by addressing the safety risks during an emergency. So the potential exists that passengers will be too engrossed in their phone conversations to be fully aware of what is happening around them in an emergency situation. This could also prevent the flight crew from getting your much needed attention and cooperation, effectively preventing them from doing their jobs well. In the informed opinion of a pilot by the name of Les Abend, in a recent CNN interview which took place on November 1st, Mr. Abend states that, quote, "The risk comes mostly from electronic devices creating a distraction. In an abnormal situation, such as an aborted takeoff or emergency landing that dictates a ground evacuation, time is of the essence. If you're focused on your phone call, will you have situational awareness? Will you understand the emergency instructions of the flight attendants in a highly stressful situation?" And according to the Wall Street Journal in an article published on November 21st, the Association of Flight Attendants Union also opposes lifting the ban because, quote, "There are far too many scenarios where in-flight cell phone use would have a very negative effect on safety and security," end quote, according to union spokesperson Corey Caldwell. So here's a hypothetical example using a real-life tragedy. It's well documented that when Asiana Flight 214 crash-landed upon landing at San Francisco Airport on July 6th of this year, many of the passengers actually took the time to retrieve their luggage before exiting the plane or evacuating the plane. Could you imagine a hypothetical situation where the plane has crashed, they're on their phones, and they take the time to finish their phone call, or worse yet, extend the phone call to tell whoever it is that they're talking to what just happened, then get their luggage, then evacuate? The real-life situation already prevented many of the passengers from evacuating in a timely manner. The use of cell phones could compound the already 3 dead and 180 injured in such a situation. So know what you all are thinking. You're thinking that flying is safer than driving. The odds of being in a plane crash or an emergency situation are very small. So that's fine. So let's talk about the social risks of in-flight conversations. So I submit to you that cell phones on planes would be akin to allowing smoking on airplanes again. Think about that. You wouldn't want the person sitting next to you on the plane smoking, would you? So the noise pollution of multiple one-sided conversations, in my opinion, would be as bad as the noise pollution, as the air pollution of smoking. Why do I feel that way? Because it's well documented that excessive noise pollution leads to annoyance. And this annoyance can cause confrontations to rise between passengers who want quiet and those who want to make cell phone calls. According to a Southern Medical Journal article by Lewis Hagler, MD, published in 2007, quote, "There's growing evidence that noise pollution is not merely an annoyance. Like other forms of pollution, it has wide-ranging adverse health, social, and economic effects." End quote. The article goes on to state, noise exposure per se is not believed to produce aggressive behavior. However, in combination with provocation, pre-existing anger or hostility, alcohol, or other psychoactive agents such as drugs to keep you calm on an airplane, noise may trigger aggressive behavior. So I would argue that being in the close confines of an airplane would exacerbate these possibilities. And really, at the end of the day, do you want to listen to one-sided conversations for hours on end? So according to another study by Dr. Stephen Stansfeld with the University of London, quote, "The most widespread and well-documented subjective response to noise is annoyance, which may include fear and mild anger, related to a belief that one is being avoidably harmed and the noise is intrusive into their personal privacy," end quote. So you wouldn't want cell phones to be allowed in a movie theater, so why would you want them unrestricted on a plane? When you're trapped in the same seat for hours on end, cell phone use can make you feel that your personal privacy is being invaded because you have no options to escape to find other areas for personal space. And this could trigger the aggressive behavior found in these studies. So now that you understand how this policy can negatively affect you, let's discuss some steps that we can take to make air travel comfortable again, as well as answering any questions that you've already posed to me about my point of view. So the first question is, does everybody want cell phones on airplanes banned? The answer, unfortunately, is no. So according to the same Wall Street Journal article published on November 21st, only a small majority of travelers polled, 60%, opposed the change. This means that almost half are in favor of cell phone use, so there's a real possibility that this change will take effect. In fact, 2 major airlines, Delta and JetBlue, have already announced plans to implement policy changes. But other airlines at this moment are only considering a change and have not announced any policy updates. And I can tell you from personal experience, my preferred carrier, United, is allowing you to use your cell phones and your personal electronic devices to listen to music and watch movies during takeoff and landing. But as of this date, they are still restricting in-flight phone conversations. So here's hoping that that policy doesn't change. You might also ask, well, seatback phones have been on planes for years, so why is this a big deal now? Well, seatback phones, called airphones, have largely been phased out over the last few years due to poor technology and low use by travelers due to the high permanent fees they charged. So the social risks of excessive noise and chatter and noise pollution never fully materialized. But today, because of the improvements in technology and the potentially lower rates of being able to get a cell phone signal while you're up in the air, could fuel more and longer calls that could lead to the dangers that I worry about. But what if you're one of the 40% and you support this change and you want to make a call on the airplane? So if this change happens, this is what I suggest for policy implementation. The fees, much like airphones, should be high enough to discourage long and unnecessary calls, and or the airline should regulate how many calls can occur at once to minimize distracting noise. They could do this by allowing only certain zones or aisles in the plane to make calls, effectively creating comfortable call-free zones. Or they could and should reserve the right to limit or disconnect or outright ban calls during critical periods of the flight, such as takeoff, landing, and other emergency situations. So now that you understand my point of view on why this policy should not change, let me show you some visuals as to what air travel looks like now and what it could look like with and without my suggested policies. So here's what your current travel looks like. So you're having some comfortable two-way conversations. That's not noise pollution. People comfortably listening to their music, doing work on their computers, maybe watching a movie. This is a nice way to travel right now. Here's what air travel could look like if unrestricted cell phone use is allowed. There are loud, one-sided conversations taking place all around you. The noise is amplified because each person is trying to talk louder than their neighbors so they can make sure the person on the other end of the phone can hear them over the background noise. Meanwhile, the attendants are also having to talk loud to get the attention of the passengers over the din of the noise. And sure, you can put your headphones on and try to escape this, but some of that noise will inevitably bleed over and you'll be able to hear it. And here's what your air travel could look like with only a few passengers at a time or only certain segments of the plane approved for cell phone use. The background noise is limited, the attendants can more easily and effectively do their jobs, and you can have a somewhat comfortable flight again, and you can make a call should you decide to sit in one of the approved phone aisles. So to summarize, in my opinion, if unrestricted cell phone calls are allowed in flight, it would ruin air travel for the majority of travelers who prefer the current policies to remain unchanged. But if the policy does change, which it will on an airline-by-airline basis, then I believe the policy restrictions that I've suggested could help to keep air travel tolerable and enjoyable, especially for those of us who spend a lot of time up in the air. So if you agree with me and you'd like to keep the policy the same or implement some reasonable guidelines, then this is what I would like you to do for me. Call your preferred airlines, especially the ones where you're a frequent flyer, and ask them not to make a change or ask them to implement policy restrictions such as the ones I've suggested to you today, and or follow the suggestion of Fred Grimm, opinion writer for the Miami Herald, who in his November 25th column urged his readers to voice their opinion on the White House We the People petition website, where a petition entitled "Instruct the FCC and FAA that cell phone use is not appropriate on flights" was launched earlier this month. The petition needs 100,000 signatures by December 21st and currently only has about 4,400. So please go out to this website, sign up, and voice your opinion. So to conclude, I'm going to leave you with this quote from Orson Welles. Orson Welles said, quote, "There are only two emotions on an airplane, boredom and terror," end quote. So my comment to you is, why would you want to add annoyance to that experience? Thank you.